welcome to Model Prose. Like Jake, I'm going to be doing mine this week on a Rolling Stone article. I went way back in time because I wanted to see what was written about my favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park. So when I was growing up, Siskel and Ebert were known as the best movie critics in the business. Unfortunately, Gene Siskel died, I think around the year 2000. So anyways, this is Roger Ebert's review of Jurassic Park. Now, I love the hook. So right out of the gate, the very first word is when. When's young Steven Spielberg? So immediately, the reader kind of gets grabbed and wants to know, well, what happened? What did he do when he was young? So I like even just the subtlety of the very first word in that hook. You'll have to excuse his non-MLA formatting of the movie Jaws when he references it, because I believe in MLA, a movie should be italicized. But I also then, going on in that sentence, really enjoy his lovely use of the colon to show Spielberg's one condition. So he said he would direct the movie on one condition. Boom, he throws in the full colon, and then follows it up with that one condition that he didn't have to show the shark for the first hour. In the second paragraph, I really like the contrast in introductions to the sentences. So the first sentence, nice, short, snappy, he was right. The very following sentence begins with I. So he's gone from he being Spielberg, I being Roger Ebert, and then the next sentence is the movie delivers on blah, blah, blah. And the following sentence, he switches it up further, adding another subject to his discussion. We see them early and often, referring to the dinosaurs. So it's kind of interesting that he's approaching this paragraph from 4 different angles, which I thought really worked together as a cohesive paragraph. Other little details within this paragraph are great. I do like his use of early and often when he says, referring to the dinosaurs, we see them early and often. I don't know, it's just got a nice flow to it. And even some of his descriptors, they are indeed a triumph of special effects artistry. Just rolls off the tongue nicely. It's a nice turn of phrase. In the next paragraph, he's writing and speaking fairly colloquially, which could be a criticism of his writing here, but you have to remember as well, his audience is really broad. He's writing to anyone that might be curious about watching the movie Jurassic Park. So that is a broad audience and probably a relatively unsophisticated audience. So I don't mind his use of contracting it is into its. I think it's appropriate just looking at who his audience is. Another thing I noticed about this paragraph is really nice use of dashes. So long-awaited project, long-awaited is hyphenated. And going back to what Mary Elizabeth had said about the use of those dashes is they should only be applied when one of the 2 words could be removed or can't be removed for the sentence to still function. So I think that works with long-awaited, half-realized, and sketched in personalities. Now I gotta say, I completely disagree with Ebert's view on this movie. So I'm analyzing his writing, but I'm not really going too deep into whether I agree or disagree with his point, because he's pretty harsh on Jurassic Park, which, as I mentioned, is my favorite movie. So he loses a few points on that one, but I think I've written 1 or 2 essays where Mary Elizabeth disagreed with me on my point, but I still managed to do okay because she appreciated my writing, and I take a similar approach to this piece here. In the paragraph that begins with Attenborough wants, again, I like how he approaches the paragraph with each sentence coming from a different perspective. So Attenborough wants the visitors to have a preview of his park. The next sentence begins with the visitors set off. And then the last sentence in the paragraph, he begins with meanwhile, and then begins into a really rapid fire succession of what everyone else is doing. So a tropical storm hits the island, the beasts knock over the fences, and Neil is left to shepherd the kids back to safety while they're hunted by towering meat eaters. So this paragraph works so well because you're quickly getting a perspective from each of the different characters, even the dinosaurs. And I have to say as well, I love that rather than just using the word dinosaurs, he's referring to them as towering meat eaters. It's just a lovely description that I really enjoyed. Let's see. His descriptions go on really well. So the Knight character, an overwritten and overplayed blubbering fool. Now, I absolutely love this guy. If you've watched any Seinfeld, it's Seinfeld's neighbor, Newman. Newman? I think it's Newman. Anyways, this guy. And so, in my opinion, he's supposed to be overplayed. He's supposed to be a blubbering fool, and he's a hilarious character that's at the crux of the movie. So, while Siskel doesn't appreciate his character in the movie, I really loved it. But again, moving past that, I just really enjoyed the way that he described the character there. There's really good parallelism moving later into this paragraph. So if this subplot had been handled cleverly, with skill and subtlety as in a caper movie, it might have added to the film's effect. So the parallel structure here being, if something had been handled cleverly, it might have added to the film's effect. So they've done a really good, Ebert has done a really good job of keeping the parallel structure of, if something would have happened, then it might have added, rather than just saying what it would have done, or I guess altering the parallel structure there. I hope you follow me on that one. Now, one thing though I would like to maybe critique about his writing is his use of M dashes. I think he may have gone a little too far. There's a few too many of them, and actually he uses regular dashes where M dashes should be used. Twice in the paragraph that I had just been discussing, and again twice in the very first sentence of the next paragraph. I don't want to be too hard on him because I'm not sure whether 27 years ago what the literary conventions were on M dashes, but if they were what they still are now, then he's probably overusing them and not using them properly because he's using regular dashes where M dashes should be used. However, again, I don't know what writing conventions were 27 years ago, so I'll give that one a pass. I love in this in the paragraph that begins with the subsequent events, I really love how he sets up his later use of the word cliches, because he first is calling them an absolutely standard, so let me start this again, this thought. The subsequent events, after the creatures get loose, follow an absolutely standard outline, similar in bits and pieces to all the earlier films in this genre. Blah, 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 blah. True, because the director is Spielberg, there's a high technical level to the execution of the cliches, so I like that he's conceding this point, but his use of cliches is set up really nicely by earlier referring to an absolutely standard outline and similar in bits and pieces to all the earlier films in this genre. So when he's describing all of that, it's really long form for saying that it's a cliche, and then later he just uses the word as a snappy, punchy emphasis to kind of, just put an exclamation mark on his point about how the film is really falling back on lots of cliches that have been used before. So yeah, I really appreciated that, or enjoyed it. And overall, I really just like the nuance and the sensitivity of his claims. So he's always willing to concede a point when there is a point against his argument. In this very paragraph, you see he says, "True, because the director is Spielberg, there is a high technical level to the execution of the cliches." So he's calling them cliches. He's deriding the overused tropes that he's seeing in Jurassic Park, and yet he's still willing to give credit to Spielberg for executing them so well. And so that's something that I try to do in my writing, and I definitely am not as good as I should be, but being nuanced, being specific, being willing to concede smaller points in a way that bolsters your stronger point, I think is a really effective rhetorical tool, because it's taking away the arguments against you. You're conceding them, so someone can't argue against your point by using them. So not only is it nuanced, but it really strengthens his argument overall. And I guess that's not really a grammatical discussion, but it's something that I really enjoyed about this piece in particular, but I think Roger Ebert overall. And then he says, but consider what could have been. Sorry. With that short sentence, he's creating a thought experiment. He's taking us, the reader, into his mind. And with a sentence like this, we want to go, but consider what could have been. I want to know what he's going to say. I want to follow his mind into this thought experiment. So he writes very eloquently with unique approaches that I really enjoyed in this piece. And one small point on the grammatical, he uses a lot of conjunctions as the first word of sentences. So later in this paragraph he says, there's a sense of grandeur to them, referring to the creatures, the dinosaurs. And then he goes on, and that is the sense lacking in the rest of the film, which quickly turns into a standard monster movie with screaming victims fleeing from roaring dinosaurs. But I personally, maybe I'm a grammatical contrarian, but I really enjoy when and or but are used at the beginning of a sentence, if done sparingly and if done appropriately, in that the following sentence is very closely and directly related to the one before, but also where if you put them together as a single sentence, maybe it would be a run-on or just too long in general. Or you use it as a tag-on, just as an aside to the previous point. Then I think using and or but to start a sentence can work really well. And that happens here repeatedly, as I just did in this sentence that I'm speaking. So in his third from last paragraph, Ebert says, I have the uneasy feeling that if Spielberg had made Close Encounters today, we would have seen the aliens in the first 10 minutes, and by the halfway mark, they'd be attacking Manhattan with death rays. Which, as a quick aside, I find is hilarious because that's basically the plot for Independence Day, another movie that I love, that Ebert here is saying, if a movie was done this way, it would be horrible and cheesy, yet it was done cheesy and amazingly in Independence Day. But back to my point, I love how he comes full circle in coming back to his original point about building anticipation. So in the very opening of this essay, he says, when young Steven Spielberg was first offered the screenplay for Jaws, he said he would direct the movie with one condition, that he didn't have to show the shark for the first hour. By slowly building the audience's apprehension, he felt, the shark would be much more impressive when it finally arrived. So he's got a huge point. His overarching point about the movie is that it's not subtle. It doesn't build anticipation. And then he goes into all of the other things that he doesn't like about the movie, but back towards the end of his essay, or his review here, he's bringing it back to that point, saying that if Spielberg had made Close Encounters today, we would have seen the aliens in the first 10 minutes. So it's a subtle reference back to his original point, which, as I like to think of myself as a sharp reader, I really appreciated that point. Then he finishes his essay with short, snappy sentences, and I think those work really well for a conclusion. You don't want someone to be blathering on and on with a complex sentence as its conclusion. You want to feel the punch. So his penultimate paragraph says, because the movie delivers on the bottom line, I'm giving it 3 stars. You want great dinosaurs, you get great dinosaurs. Short, snappy sentences, even though they're made a little bit longer by having commas in there, but the points, they come rapid fire and they're not complicated, and I love that. Spielberg enlivens the action with lots of nice little touches. I especially liked a sequence where a smaller creature leaps suicidally onto a larger one and they battle to the death. On the monster movie level, the movie works and is entertaining. So here again, he's complimenting the movie. He's conceding points before he gets to his main point, his main argument, which is, and again, we're starting with conjunction, but with its profligate resources, it could have been so much more. Short, snappy, emphasizes his point after conceding what he thinks is good about the movie. Overall, I really enjoyed his writing style, and I hope you enjoyed my critique. Thank you.